Lee Howard. I work for Time Warner Cable doing investigating new network technologies, things that are a few years in the future, not necessarily what we're going to use now, but what we're going to use in a couple of years to improve the internet experience for our consumers or reduce our costs. In the course of investigating new technologies, I was looking at how we're going to handle the exhaustion of IPv4 addresses. And one of the first things that came to mind was Carrier Grate NAT. So I looked at what's the cost of Carrier Grate NAT, and people kept telling me that Carrier Grate NAT is bad, is evil, and that seemed like a religious argument, and I wanted to see if I could make a business decision. So I tried to quantify how bad is it, how bad is the customer experience compared to alternatives. So I looked at what are the things that break when you use Carrier Grate NAT, and it's things like console gaming in certain circumstances, peer-to-peer file sharing doesn't necessarily work very well. Some even video streaming doesn't work very well behind a Carrier Grate NAT. So then it was a matter of figuring out how many customers or how many consumers might use any of those given technologies, and then make some guesses about how many customers would have a negative experience. So if they have a negative experience, they're either going to call tech support, which costs money for us, or they're going to cancel service. And if they cancel service or they call tech support, then we're losing revenue or costing additional money. So then I can do some analysis and we can do some modeling. And it's going to vary. And so the numbers for one company for their users or in even a different economy might use different applications that perform well or perform poorly. But I came to a number that I can model that says about $30 per user per year behind a Carrier Grate NAT is what it would cost. And that's a combination of the capital cost and the OpEx and the potential lost revenue, which seems pretty significant. So $30 per user per year was so surprising to me that I had to say, well, so I went back and checked and I talked to a lot of people who all agreed that at least, even if my numbers, if my guesses are wrong, the way I got there makes sense. So anybody else can go use the same model and come up with their version. So the next thing I do is to say, if $30 per user per year is a lot, are there alternatives? And the next obvious alternative seems to be buying IPv4 addresses. It's amazing to consider that buying addresses, if they cost probably now $11 per address, maybe somewhere in that range, that's a lot cheaper than $30. And maybe it makes more sense to buy addresses than to deploy Carrier Grate NAT. And this is another one of those conclusions that is just so shocking that it's astonishing to even consider. And really, it's a complete reconsideration of how to address the eventual run-out of the stocks, the inventories of the RIRs. So then it's comparing what effect does that have on the internet industry, on the consumer in general. If the costs are going to rise for ISPs to deliver internet access by either some amount of money for buying addresses or by offsetting the lost revenue for deploying Carrier Grate NAT, then either of those ISPs will have to trim their margins, which doesn't go over very well in the chief executive's office, or they're going to have to raise their prices to offset those costs, which doesn't go over very well with consumers. So it ends up being not a very good story for IPv4. And any way you look at it, IPv4 is just going to continue getting more and more expensive. And the only way to avoid those costs is going to be to deploy IPv6. What I was trying to do is to build a spreadsheet and a white paper that people can use to examine my conclusions and my methodology and plug in their own numbers for how many consumers use the various things that break, how many people do the kinds of things that might cause problems. You can even plug in your own costs for tech support calls, plug in your own revenue numbers, and figure out what would be the best solution for you. And even plug in your own estimates for the eventual cost of IPv4 addresses and see what makes the most sense for any individual organization. And that's what I definitely most strongly recommend is you have to do your own analysis. I'm just providing a model for how to think about it.